Remember that hutch that I bought and I took the bottom portion and turned it into a credenza and now it houses all the toys that for my grandbabies? Well, this is the top and she is beautiful right now, but she needs a little love. She's got a few dings and a few marks here and there, and the color, well, it's less than desirable right now. So we're going to make her a little more modern, and just for a hint, she's going to have a coastal theme. Watch this video to the end so that you can see how she transforms into something beautiful. So our first step is to go ahead and remove the screws that are holding on those embellishments on the top. The awesome part about this piece is with just a few screws removed, those embellishments come off super easy. So we're not removing glue and having to do major disassembling or cutting or anything. They just pop right off. Oh my gosh, look how much better that looks already. Oh, I love it. Then from there, we're going to go ahead and remove all of the hardware to remove the door, and we're going to pop that glass out as well and any other hardware that's on there. And then taking off, just prying some of those staples out with a screwdriver to pop the back off. And I'll tell you why in just a little bit. We have something fun we're going to do so that we need the back off. Now the next step, go ahead, grab some white lightning, spray that on there, scrub it with a scrubby brush, and then rinse with clear water. Then wipe down with a rag. Making sure you're getting into all the nooks and crannies. Now it's time to prime. We did give this a light scuff sanding with 220 grit sandpaper. And then I'm adding Zinsser Bin 123. It's a bonding primer and stain blocker as well, but I'm using it mainly for the bonding purposes with this piece because it is made out of several different types of materials. On the side is a paneling with some sort of coating. The back is paneling, but yet there are parts of it that are wood as well. So it's just better to prime the entire thing. I'm using a roller to apply the primer to the back panel. And then up here at the top there was a hole where the light was, but we're not using the light this time around, so I am just plugging that with, actually this was a chair leg that I cut off and it fit perfectly, so I just popped that right in there. And you're going to see my cute little hammer that I love to use all the time. It's just so handy. Then after that is glued in place, we're going to mix up some Bondo. This is all-purpose Bondo. It dries very quickly, so you got to work in small amounts. But we're going to fill those holes at the top where the screws were holding the embellishments. Then I grabbed my Flexio 5000 to spray the inside. The inside's going to be green. It's a lovely sage green color. It's a mixture of Dixie Belle's chalk mineral paint in the color kudzu, drop cloth, and a little bit of kernel mustard. I am spraying the inside because it was just going to be easier to get all those little nooks and crannies, and that's another reason, one of the reasons why we took the back off, so that we could get to all of those areas a whole lot easier. Just make sure that you mask off the glass. So this is the back of the china cabinet. I am wanting to put on some of this wallpaper, and it looks like grass cloth. It has a texture to it, and this is the paintable kind, and it's also pre-pasted. I just picked it up at Lowe's, and I've never used the pre-pasted kind before, so I'm kind of anxious to see how this is going to come out, because this is the first step in what we're going to do with the back of this, because I want that to stand out and be a statement. So the sides and everything will be fairly neutral, and then the back I want to be a statement. Okay, so let's try this. First thing you're going to want to do is measure out your pieces. We're going to need 2 and then a little more, so we'll need 3 pieces cut. Okay, so what it says to do is to roll it up backwards. So that the print or your pattern is facing inward and the paste is on the outside. Now, ideally, if you had something that was the exact length, that would be better. I'm using this tub because it's what I had, but they do make wallpaper tubs. You're going to do a whole wall. That would make it a whole lot easier. So then you just place it in the tub, making sure the whole back gets wet. And then you're going to pull it out. Now, I did see someone else they took a roller. There's a dry spot right there. Let's get some water on it. They took a paint roller that was wet with water, and they used that to wet the back. And what this is called is bookending. You're basically folding it upon itself, but you don't want to crease it right there. And then just fold it on itself. And then go like this. And they said let it soak for a minute before applying it. So what I'm doing is actually drawing lines where I want the seams to go, because there are those bars across that will cover, the shelves. So I'm just going ahead and you're going to place the first sheet down across that line that we had drawn where the shelves are going to sit, so you won't see that seam that goes horizontally across the back of the cabinet. I'm using a little squeegee to just make sure we get out all the air bubbles. And then with your second piece, we measure to fit into that center section, and then we're going to cut. Ideally, it probably would have been better to do this while it was dry, but I kind of came up with a different plan as I went along, and so be it. And then I'm using a rag to wipe off any of the excess paste that might be coming up through that seam, and water and whatnot as well, and it helps me to see any of the bubbles as well as rub out some of those bubbles too. And then go ahead and place your third piece on the same as you do the rest. You're just going to lay it down, get the seam really nice and even, and then smooth out all those bubbles with your hand. Now while that's drying, I went to my silhouette and I brought up the image that I wanted to use, and I blew it up to the size of the back of my piece. And I cut it out with, I have a Silhouette Cameo 4, and I placed it down where I wanted it. But first I butted that back up against the back of the cabinet, and I drew out where the shelves were, so I knew exactly where I wanted to put that stencil. I used Oracle 631. It's a removable type of vinyl to cut out my stencil. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to take some white paint, and we are going to go around all of the edges of the stencil. And what that does is kind of creates a barrier where the top color that we're putting on next doesn't seep up underneath that stencil. At least gives it a fighting chance anyways. With this textured wallpaper, there is more likelihood of it bleeding through, but we can touch that up after. So I grabbed some more of that custom sage green color, and that's what we're going to paint the entire back. I am kind of using a stippling motion around the stencil itself, and then I go ahead and just use regular brush strokes for the rest, just getting in there. This actually took 2 coats, but the wallpaper paints so nicely. I really want to use this again somewhere in my house. So it was just really awesome to work with. And then we're just peeling off that stencil now. And this is the so super fun part because you start to see that image come to life. Like I said, this is going to have a coastal theme. And so I used something that was, this is a bird in the grasses that we would see here in North Florida. Now all the stencil is off, and there are a few places that I want to touch up, like here where the stencil didn't quite match up. And then of course up there had a little snafu. It was right on the line where the seam was, and when I pulled up the stencil, it pulled up the wallpaper. So I got to glue that back down. And then we're going to put a whitewash over the whole thing, a whitewash glaze, so that this is subtle and not super stark. So that's the next step. And for some reason, I lost that footage. So just imagine applying some whitewash glaze and then wiping it back down with a rag to reveal the texture of the wallpaper. But what I'm doing here is painting a base coat of sandbar so that it actually creates texture by using the chip brush. I'm doing 2 coats of that, and then we'll apply the Van Dyke brown glaze. And that is where we're going to create that faux wood finish. We're just going to apply it just like you would paint, work in small sections, and then come back through with a hand broom. You can use a whisk broom. You can use I think there's even like a wallpaper type broom that you can get. This is just an inexpensive broom from Walmart. I've heard that there's one at a Dollar Tree. I tried, but they actually didn't have one there. So I'm using the one that I found at Walmart. It came with a dustpan, and it was around $5. Not too bad. And it's reusable. So just, you can use it over and over again, right? Like I said, we're just doing a section at a time. This glaze actually is water-based, so it has a fairly short open time. So you really need to use it before it dries, because you don't want it, once it's dry, it's stuck there, and you got to kind of start over again. So I like to use all sides of the broom. So we're going to go across the piece, we'll say horizontally, and then we're going to flip it around and do it vertically as well. And that just gives you different kind of grain patterns. The other thing to note is that when you're going around the door and these frames around the glass sides, you want to make sure to keep the grain pattern consistent with the way that it naturally would go. So naturally, when the piece is horizontal, it would have a horizontal grain pattern, and where it's vertical, it would have the vertical grain pattern. And this is what we're trying to create here. I always do that sample piece. So make sure, just get a piece of scrap wood or whatever you have laying around and test out your colors first so that you know what exactly it is that you want. And you'll notice here how I'm kind of using that broom in all different directions to give you those different grain patterns. I've also taken a chip brush where I've kind of cut into the bristles a little bit to create a jagged pattern in the bristles. Again, just to create more of a pattern and just different because wood grain is not all the same exact. So we're trying to create a faux finish that looks fairly realistic. There she is. This is the first step. I could have stopped right here, or I could have added, if I wanted a little more rustic look, a little more of that driftwood look, I could have added some gray glaze or maybe even some really dark brown glaze, but I chose white glaze to go over the top because I wanted that very coastal, clean, light and airy look. I wanted to lighten it up quite a bit. So we're just using that same exact technique, working in small sections, and we're going to go ahead and go back over it with that broom to really blend that in. Getting into that area between where the trim piece met the side of the cabinet was getting a little difficult, and that's where that chip brush that I had cut the bristles, that's where that came in handy. I kind of keep, if you've ever had your hair cut where they kind of come in at an angle on the blunt ends of your hair, that's what I did with the chip brush. I didn't cut it, straight across. And here, again, using a sample, this is what we're trying to create with this technique. And then you're just going to continue that process over the entire piece. I did mask off the inside of the door opening so that I didn't get any splatter, because as you drag that broom across, sometimes the glaze will kind of splitter or splatter. And you don't want to get that obviously inside. We don't want a speckled finish on the inside. So generally, you would put this glaze on and then wipe it back with a rag, like I did on the back panel, like I said earlier. But with this, we wanted to use that broom. Now we're going to go ahead and measure the bottom of the cabinet so that we can create a base and add some legs. Let's head outside and get that built. So I had these legs. They were actually on a sewing machine cabinet, and the sewing machine cabinet itself was all particle board, so it was trash. But the legs were awesome, and they already had the taper to them. And if you remember from my last project, cutting the tapering part was the hardest part. So I said, shoot, that's already done for me. So there we go. So I measured them to 12 inches because I want the cabinet to be 12 inches up off the ground. And so, yep, we're just going to cut them. So now we got to do some math. So I measured the width of the cabinet at 47 inches. So we got to take the width of this off of there, which is 1.5 inches. Yeah, I'm right at 1.5 inches. So 47 minus 3 would be 44. And then take another 1/2 inch off so that it's inset a little bit, 1/4 inch on each side. That's 44 minus 1/2 inch. That's 43.5 inches. So now we're just going to put pocket holes all along the top and then the two ends, so that the two ends can fasten the legs on each end and the top fastens to the bottom of your cabinet. The Craig jig that I am using is linked in the description, so you can just check that out there. It is the entry-level Craig jig and I highly recommend it. It has worked wonderfully for me. Obviously someday I'm probably going to splurge a little bit and upgrade, but this has worked great for me. I bought the clamp extra as well. Now we're just going to go ahead and fasten the legs to, this is the back piece. I found that if I got it started and fastened a little bit and then laid it down, and then I actually put a pencil underneath so that I could have the right spacing. It just something that you find whatever, and this is just what worked for me. So I actually used Tobacco Road and Au Natural stain on the legs and on the base that I built. That is the No Pain Gel Stain from Dixie Belle. So once the back had two legs attached to it and then the front had two legs attached to it, I then attached my sides. And that is what you're seeing right here. We're using the 1.5 inch Craig screws. You need to use the appropriate screw length for the type of material that you're using. Then once those legs are attached, I clamped it to the bottom. I flipped the cabinet on its face and then clamped this entire base to the bottom of the cabinet, and now we're just screwing it in. Now I've placed the back onto the cabinet, and I'm noticing this bar that goes down the center of the shelves is just sticking out like a sore thumb. So I've tried some glaze to see if maybe that would help it to blend in, but it just doesn't quite look the same. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut some pieces of wallpaper. I'm going to paint them, glaze them, and then add them in. And hopefully it should be pretty easy with a razor blade, some little scissors, and my squeegee, of course. And actually, it was more daunting in my brain than it actually was in reality. The hardest part was really cutting it, just getting your hands in those particular. I felt like I was doing a little bit of yoga to kind of get some of those places where I had to cut it. But other than that, it really was super easy, and I think it added the absolute perfect finished professional, just custom looking touch to it. And now I'll just take some white paint and continue the design of the stencil up onto that center section. It took a few coats because I'm covering white over green, as well as then I added some glaze over the top because the glaze had a little bit of a different tint than the white paint. And now we have to seal the entire thing, and we're nearing the finish line, y'all. Like I said, this took quite a while. I probably should have stopped a couple techniques ago, but I really had a vision in my head, and well, I just had to follow through. So I'm using the Dixie Belle's Gator Hide to seal this piece because it has that nice, hard, durable, water repellent finish. And I'm just applying it with a brush. And now we can go ahead and add our door back on. Well, there she is, y'all. What do you think? I put a few staging items in there. If you notice, these items might be a little familiar because I grabbed them off my shelves in my living room. But I really like her. I added a little gold doorknob as well, and later on I actually added a little bit of gold gilding wax to the hinges so it all matched. But there's the base and the finish. I think she come out really pretty and would look perfect in someone's beach house. If you like this video and would like to see more tutorials from this channel, go ahead and click that subscribe button and notification bell so you never miss a video.